Why, thank you for that gracious introduction. And thank you to the translators. And thank you all for being here. I'm delighted to review for you a very important text for Hatha Yoga, as well as how we practice yoga today. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is dated to the 15th century and contains in one place a lot of ideas that span over thousands of years. There are numerous other Hatha Yoga texts that are worth studying. Such as the Amrita Siddhi, the Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, the Garanda Samgita, and the Shiva Samgita. But the Hatha Yoga Pradipika has a lot of these ideas conveniently located in one text for your convenience. In November, we're going to explore chapter 4 of this 4-chapter text. But if it is your first time studying it, you're in luck. Because it will also contain a review of the first 3 chapters. I'll do a brief review for you this morning. Well, it's morning for me, whatever time it is for you. And I'll mainly focus on the 10 seals in chapter 3. So if someone can cue the slides, be delighted to present from them. Thank you. So first, I just wanted to acknowledge that the artistry for this promotional poster is just amazing. The title, Profound Partnerships and Unmatched Joy, is a perfect way of capturing the latter half of chapter 3 and the latter half of chapter 4. But first, let's talk about what Hatha Yoga means. I'm going to make about a 30-minute presentation or more and leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat at any time, and then I will double back and get to them. So the word hatha is a Sanskrit word that can be translated a number of ways. If you look at hatha in a credible dictionary, it means the forceful or the laborious or the effortful approach to yoga. But in the commentaries on this text, hatha also means the integration of the sun and the moon, which implies a balanced approach of effort and ease. In this course, I've been asked to present the Sanskrit and to help teach anyone that wants to learn Sanskrit how to read and write it and appreciate the language. Next slide, please. So the word Sanskrita is how you say Sanskrit in the language that we're speaking of. The word Sanskrita is translated into English as perfected language. Prior to the 3rd century before our Common Era, the Sanskrit language was sometimes called Vedic. And then a grammarian by the name of Panini took the language and helped make it more accessible as well as more clear. So if you go to the next slide, I'll offer a handful of reasons that you might find compelling to study Sanskrit. One, it's the language that the great classics of yoga were composed in. And it's important to learn it to properly understand them. As many of you know, much can be lost in translation. So understanding the text and the language it was composed in can help offer much needed clarification. Two, Sanskrita is one of the oldest examples of the Indo-European language. Indo-European language is the root of many of the languages that are widely spoken today, such as English, Spanish, German, French, etc. And learning Sanskrit can help you understand or appreciate all of these languages, as well as the role of language itself in perception and meaning. And then the third reason is Sanskrita is a phonetic language. Meaning that it's pronounced the same way every time and everything is pronounced. It's also based on the way the energy moves through inner channels. Meaning that if you sing it properly, it can help us to detect the inner winds flowing through our body and to direct them into the central channel called the Sushumna Nadi. So I hope to offer you a number of opportunities to experience this by singing some of the verses from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Next slide, please. Here is just a key to understanding Sanskrit at a glance. Up at the top, you have the Devanagari script, which is also used for other languages like Hindi, Prakrit, Marathi, Konakani, and Nepali. So learning how to read and write Devanagari can help you understand those languages as well. And then this part in the middle is called transliteration, which is a pronunciation guide that uses Roman script. For comparison, Roman script is used in a lot of languages such as English, French, Spanish, and German, etc. But these diacritical marks that you see underneath the M or the R are based on what's called the IAST or International Alphabet for Sanskrit Transliteration. That's internationally well known. So I'll teach you how to pronounce the words correctly, and more importantly, understand what they mean. So at the bottom in the quotation marks is the translation. And the translation is an attempt to represent the meaning as accurately as possible. And if you read one or more translation of a Sanskrit text, you can start to appreciate how hard it is and the errors that can be made or the different choices that can add more understanding to the topic. So here's a verse. Next slide, please. I asked Earl Burney, who will also be teaching in this course to help us better understand the philosophy behind the text, what would be the most important verse to include in today's review? And he said this one. So I'll just read it for you, and you can listen along if you want. Atam vina raja yogam vina hatha na siddhati tato yugmama nishpatehi samabhyase. In English, this translates as no goals, though, can be reached if you practice royal yoga without the yoga of sun and moon, or that of sun and moon without the royal. Therefore, practice them both together until you reach their culmination. Next slide, please. In this course, I will take you all the way back to the beginning and help you learn how to read and write the Devanagari script by teaching you the Sanskrit alphabet. And I'll also help you look at the translation of each word in more detail, as well as some of the grammar, so you can appreciate this particular translation, which I find very helpful. The cool thing about this text is the Sanskrit is in complete sentences. And it was composed in a meter that lends itself to being sung. Some people say that you don't need to understand the meaning of what you're singing. I disagree. I think understanding the meaning of what you're singing makes it so much more powerful. So Hatha yoga is the yoga of the sun and the moon, which if I were to translate this into a 20th century understanding, it's integrating the left and the right hemisphere in a skillful way. The sun would be the left hemisphere of our brain, which controls the right half of the body. The moon would be the right hemisphere of the brain, which controls the left half of the body. Hatha yoga classically is this approach to practicing self-control by working from the outside in, as well as the inside out. The first two chapters of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika are almost exclusively working from the outside in. Chapter 1 introduces 10 yamas and 10 niyamas, as well as 15 different postures that we can use to sit in meditation or prepare for it, as well as recommendations for diet, the kind of food we consume and how we consume it, to prepare your body for deep meditation. Chapter 2 contains what's called pranayama or kumbakas. This would be specific ways to grab the reins of the mind by controlling the breath, and to not only calm the mind so that it's less busy and fluctuating, more attentive, but to identify and to untangle knots called grantis that accumulate as we live. So that would be more of the Hatha yoga approach to understanding self-discipline. And Raja Yoga would be the last two chapters of this text, chapters 3 and chapters 4. Raja Yoga was later described as the path of meditation. And in meditation, the 8 limbs of yoga are very helpful for cultivating the insight that can transform suffering into its opposite. But if we start there, it's often inaccessible to most people. So if we combine the outer practices of Hatha Yoga and the inner practices of Royal Yoga, it increases our chances of success greatly by making it more accessible to anyone and everyone. So here's a word by word breakdown of this sutra, and then I'll ask you to sing it. So the first word is hatam. That T with a dot underneath it is pronounced by bringing your tongue to the roof. So it's hatam, hatam. And whenever you see the H after a character, it means you aspirate. You put some breath behind it. Hatam. Meaning if you held your hand 3 inches from your face, you should feel some air on your skin. Hatam. So this is referring to the yoga of sun and moon as the object. The word vina, that little line over the vowel, means you pronounce it twice as long. Vina means without. So without the object of Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, referring to the royal discipline, in the subject case, which means it's the subject of the sentence. In all languages, sentences or complete thoughts have the subject, the object, and verb. So without Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga is what's being conveyed. And then you have the same word, Raja Yogam. So Raja Yogam is referring to the royal discipline as an object. And Hatha is referring to the sun and the moon as the subject. Na just means without or not, as does vina without. And then siddhyati is the verb here, which means succeed. Hataha means that, and it's in the object case, or I'm sorry, the subject case. So it's referring to Raja Yoga and Hatha Yoga. Yugma means a pair, they belong together. Ma means to measure. And nishpatehi is it's from the word nishpati, which means going forth. But nishpatehi is a declension that means it's in the genitive or the of category. So it's of going forth. And then we have another verb, samabhyasate, which is in the optative case, which means one ought to do this. So the translation that we're going to be studying in Hatha Yoga Pradipika 4, I think is really well done. Here it is. No goals can be reached if you practice royal yoga without the yoga of sun and moon, or that of sun and moon without the royal. Therefore, practice them both together until you reach their culmination. Let's go back to the previous slide, please. So I'd like to give you an example of how this particular sutra or how this particular verse can be appreciated by singing or just listening carefully. A verse like this was composed so that it could be sung. And there are a number of melodies one could choose. Here's one that I find incredibly beautiful and inspiring for getting the winds to move into the central channel. Turn my sound for musicians on so you can hear me. Hatham vina raja yogo, raja yogam vina hatha, nasiddhyati tato yugmama, nishpatehi samabhyase. So feel free to sing with me or just listen as you sit and concentrate your attention into the central channel. Hatham vina raja yogo, raja yogam vina hatha, nasiddhyati tato yugmama, nishpatehi samabhyase. Hatham vina raja yogo, raja yogam vina hatha, nasiddhyati tato yugmama, nishpatehi samabhyase. One more time. Hatham vina raja yogo, raja yogam vina hatha, nasiddhyati tato yugmama, nishpatehi samabhyase. So I hope that you could appreciate the beauty of the Sanskrit language and that it was intended to be sung. And maybe even the utility of taking a verse like this and memorizing it so that you can reflect back on it and maybe even share it with anyone that would be inspired by it. Next slide, please. So Hatha yoga is sometimes called advanced yoga because you're not just sitting in meditation, but you're also focusing on how you live your life. And instead of trying to ignore your body or disassociate from it, you embrace it and make it into the vehicle for your awakening. That said, if you'd only do the outer practices of yoga, but you fail to sit and concentrate the mind properly, then you can only get so far. Next slide, please. So here is a brief review of chapter 3. Starting with this sutra. If you'd like to learn it, please repeat after me. Pranasya. The N has a dot underneath it, which means you bring the tongue to the roof of the mouth when you say prana. And the vowel with the long line over it means it's pronounced twice as long as the other vowels. Pranasya means of vital energy. And then please say shunya. The S with the apostrophe on it means it's a sh sound. And shunya means empty. Padavi means the path. So pada you might recognize as like foot. Padavi means the path that you walk. So shunya padavi means the path of emptiness. Tada is sometimes what magicians say when they pull the rabbit out of the hat. And it means there and then. Like in the Yoga Sutra, when it describes what yoga is, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, we become whole by stopping how the mind turns. Tada drashtuhu swarupe vastana means there and then the seer will abide in their own form. So here in this case, tada is being used in the same way as there and then. Then please say Raja. Raja means royal. So it means the best of the best, the highest of the highest. And patayate. So Raja patayate. You might recognize pat from Patanjali, means to fall. In this particular case, patayate means to pierce or to remove. And it's a verb here. So patayate, to pierce or remove. And then you have tada again, there and then. Chittam, you might recognize. Whenever you see a C like that, it's always pronounced as a cha, unlike English. So chittam is referring to the mind. But the M at the end with the dot is implying that it's the mind being seen objectively. Normally, we're identified with the activities of our mind, which is a klesha, an affliction called asmita, which makes it difficult, if not impossible, to practice controlling or responding intelligently to the mind. My apologies, translators, if I'm going too fast. Feel free to drop a message in the chat if I get too quick. So niralambam means without support or free. It also has that M with a dot at the end, which is how you indicate an adjective. So without support or free refers to the mind. Ta-da! Once again, the third time, it's referring to there and then. And kalasya, you might recognize. Kala means time or death. The sya that you have at the end means it's of death. And vanchanam means cheated. So this is a pretty good translation. Pranasya shunya padavi tada raja patayate tada chitam niralambam tada kalasya vachanam. Then too, the inner winds travel the path of emptiness. Then too, you have stepped upon the royal road. Then too, the mind has nothing at all to see. Then too, you have cheated the Lord of Death. So I'll invite you to sing this with me if you want, or just listen along. The sounds of the Sanskrit language can be appreciated by just simply calming your mind and listening. But if you sing, this will greatly enhance the experience of moving the winds into the central channel, where you can return yourself to yourself here in this moment. So feel free to sing with me. Pranasya shunya padavi. Your turn. Pranasya shunya padavi. Tadaraja patayate. Tadaraja patayate. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. Pranasya shunya padavi. Pranasya shunya padavi. Tada raja patayate. Tada raja patayate. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. Let's do it together. Pranasya shunya padavi. Tada raja patayate. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. Pranasya shunya padavi. Tada raja patayate. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. One more time. Pranasya shunya padavi. Tada raja patayate. Tada chitam niralambam. Tada kalasya vanchanam. Then too, the inner winds travel the path of emptiness. Then too, you have stepped upon the royal road. Then too, the mind has nothing at all to see. Then too, you have cheated the Lord of Death. Next slide, please. What is the central channel that so many texts have referenced? Here on the left is a beautiful drawing that is helpful for visualizing where to send the energy when you're concentrating. And if you keep doing this on a regular basis, like there and then, here and now, and all day long, then you might eventually experience untangling all the knots that could be preventing the winds from entering the central channel. It's called grunties. And look something like the picture on the right, which is a beautiful painting that was inspired by someone having the direct perception of emptiness, or the eighth limb of yoga, samadhi. Next slide, please. The chapter 3 at a glance can be described by these 10 mudras. Who can tell me what a mudra is? Just type it in the chat section if you know. Yeah. Okay, so I'm getting more than one person thinks of a mudra as a hand gesture. This is a very modern view of a mudra that many books have been written on. For example, when you tuck the first finger underneath the thumb like this, it's called Jnana Mudra, that some pronounce as Gyan Mudra. But it symbolizes this subservience of the intellect to pure consciousness. And this is only 1/3 of a mudra. So a mudra is made up of a posture, like a hand gesture, or even just sitting with your legs mildly crossed, as in Siddhasana. But it also includes a breath retention, a kumbhaka. So a very important third of a mudra would be have some control over the breath to where it can eventually just slow down to an unforced pause. And perhaps the most important part of a mudra is a meditation, so a focal point of attention. So those are the 3 parts of a mudra: physical posture, a breath retention, and a focal point of concentration. So there are 10 descriptions of mudras in this 3rd chapter that is the whole 3rd chapter at a glance. And it starts off with Maha Mudra. So Maha means great. And the great mudra would be a way of positioning your body so that you can get the winds to flow in the central channel. If you've ever studied this text, you might recognize that the outer practice of Maha Mudra looks a lot like Janu Shirshasana. It's not exactly the way that Janu Shirshasana is practiced today, but similar. And you also use the breathing to not only slow down the breath, but to get all of the winds to enter into the central channel at a crucial point. But the most important part of Maha Mudra would be the focal point. And for about 1,000 years, the inner practice of Maha Mudra was lost in India due to many wars and much damage done to northern India. But in our lifetime, these inner methods are being reunited with the outer method. And it's amazing to be alive at this time. So Maha Mudra in other areas that survived the chaos describes emptiness in several flavors that can help us take our current understanding and continue to see emptiness as clearly as possible. So in this course, you will find quite a few helpful ways of describing the object to be focusing on. And that's Mahamudra. We got to this one and the next few in the last course. And we'll get to all of them in this last course. The second one is Mahabandha. Does anyone know what Mahabandha is? It was taught in one of the first 5 classes that I took as the combination of Jalandhara Bandha, Mula Bandha, and Uddiyana Bandha all at the same time. So Mahabandha in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is this experience you might have whenever you slow the exhale down to an unforced pause and linger there. You can try that now if you want, no pressure. But if it's done unforcefully, the breath will stop by some sort of tension in the neck and maybe even some sort of suspension of the movement of the diaphragm muscle below the lungs. And if you linger in that pause, you might find just an automatic, not a force, but an automatic lifting of the pelvic floor. One can say that when you're focusing on seeing the true nature of reality and getting the winds in the central channel, your body will just automatically do these things. That's working from the inside out. Well, in Hatha Yoga, you can do the outer 3 things more forcefully or proactively, such as whenever you retain the breath, you can gently tuck your chin to direct the upward moving wind downward. You can gently lift the pelvic floor to direct the downward moving wind upward. And you can not only suspend the diaphragm below the lungs, but you can also draw it in and towards this spot about 3 fingers or 4 fingers below the navel and 3 fingers back, called the Triveni. So the winds enter the central channel. And that would be how Mahabandha is described in the text. Then we covered Mahaveda, which is everything that I just said, plus using your hands to lift your seat up off your cushion and then dropping it down. So my cushion is soft. I can lift up an inch and then drop. And it sends a wave of energy up my spine, right to the crown of the head. For those of us who have distractions or monkey mind, this forceful method can be really helpful for getting the winds into the central channel, even if it's only for an instant. Now, when you say Mahaveda plus cha just means and, the two combine to become Mahavedascha. Just like in the definition of yoga in the Yoga Sutra, yoga and chitta becomes yogash-chitta. The fourth mudra is called Ke-chari. Ke-chari means the sky dancer. And in a mild way, you maybe do this every single time you meditate. You rest your tongue where the upper two front teeth and the palate meet. That is a gentle form of the outer method of Kechari Mudra. Some say it helps connect a circuit along the central channel. However, if you want to be more Hatha about it, some have learned that you can move your tongue back, especially if you cut the skin at the bottom of the tongue, and you can get your tongue to go all the way back to the nasal cavities, which I don't recommend, but that was all the rage in the 15th century. But the more important part of Kechari Mudra, regardless of where you place your tongue, would be the suspension of the breath, non-forcement, and the focal point of seeing emptiness as vast as the sky. Emptiness in all things, emptiness in the seer, and emptiness in the seeing as well. So we got to cover these in chapter 3 really well. And the next one is Udyanam. So Uddiyana, you might recognize as the flying up block. In a yoga class, we might be directed to bring the lower ribs towards the navel and draw the navel in and up, and then maybe lift and spread the collarbones with some dynamism. David Swenson describes Uddiyana Bandha as you put one hand below the navel, one hand above. And basically you're trying to restrict the movement of your upper hand while the lower hand moves freely. These are all skillful means. It's called upaya to at least develop a beginner's understanding of Uddiyana Bandha. The way I'll describe it is bonding your attention to the torso, arms, and hands, so that you can observe the movement of the pranavayu, which expands every time you inhale, and the samanavayu, which is the activity of the digestive system. And by bonding your attention to these winds, you can start to respond intelligently to them. The most forceful practice of Uddiyana would be during an exhale suspension. At the end of the exhale, you draw the diaphragm in and up. The the way of doing this in a yoga class is a lot easier to just keep your attention in this area of your body so that you can make appropriate adjustments. But in advanced pranayama, it is the exhale suspension plus the drawing of the diaphragm in and up to push the winds into the central channel. The next one is Mula Bandha, which is the root lock, the one that almost everyone's heard of. Mula Bandha is bonding your attention to the lower half of your body so you can detect the flow of Panavayu, the downward wind. And then an example of trying to move the downward wind upward into the central channel could be done with the lifting of the pelvic floor. And in pranayama practice, this is intended to be done the whole time. So bandha, when you combine it with The next word, Bandaha, becomes Bando. And Jalantara is the throat catcher lock. And in chapter 4, we're going to go back to Jalantara Banda and look at it in more detail. Jalandhara can be forcefully done by tucking your chin, but not too forcefully. One commentary recommends imagine a ripe plum between your chin and chest while you're wearing your favorite white shirt. So it's done very carefully, precisely. Karani Viparita is a very well-known posture in yoga. It eventually became shoulder stand. But the earlier version is often done with a block or a bolster underneath the pelvis, and you're just elevating the legs. So we'll dive more into this in the upcoming course 4. And the outer practice is great for getting the legs and most of your body upside down. But the inner practice is to detect the flow of the prana vayus, especially if they're afflicted, and to move them into the central channel to transform those afflictions into their opposite. Then you have Vajroli Mudra, which would be the diamond fluid, and Shakti Chalanam Mudra, which would be partner practice. And these are rarely taught openly, but here's an opportunity to understand them, not just scholarly, but also practically. So I'm really looking forward to this upcoming course. The last line of the sutra, or this verse, is idam, which is referring to this, and he mudra dashakam jauraman. Maybe if you have read the Heart Sutra, you might recognize that word, Jaura Marana, and Anashanam. So I think I translated this, or at least I tried to, but I can't find my translation at the moment. But here is the translation provided for the sutra. Here are the 10 different types of seals which destroy aging and death. So I think Jara Marana means aging and Anashana means death. The great seal, Mahamudra, the great lock, Mahabandha, the great spear, Mahaveda, sky dancer, Kechari, the root lock, Mulabandha, the flight. Oh, I skipped over sky dancer, Kechari. No, flight is Uddiyana Bandha, the root lock, Mulabandha. Piercing lock, Jalandhara Bandha, the water catcher. The one known as reverse action, Viparita Karani or Karani Viparita. Vajroli, the diamond fluid. And Shakti Chalanam, inciting her power. Let's show the next slide so everyone can see that at a glance. So far, I think we've gotten through the first 5 of these well, and we're going to cover the last 5 in greater detail. So if you want to just listen to this list, I'll sing it for you. And here's a melody that I use to memorize the Heart Sutra. I'll turn on the sound for musicians so you can hear me. Mahamudra Mahabando Mahavedascha Kechari Udyanam Mula Bandascha Bando Jalandhara Bita Karani Viparita Kya Vajroli Shakti Chalan Idam Hi Mudra Dakshakam Jaramaram Anashnam Mahamudra Mahabando Mahavedashcha Kechari Udyanam Mula Bandascha Bando Jalandhara Biti Karani Viparita Kya Vajroli Shakti Chalan Idam Hi Mudra Dakshakam Jaramaranam Asanam. Well, that's chapter 3 at a glance. And chapter 4 is about emptiness and experiencing the direct perception of it through listening carefully. Next slide, please. Yes, you can have access to these slides happily. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat section except for when's the concert. Well, I will provide a mini concert in every class for Hatha Yoga Pradipika 4. So here is a verse from chapter 4 that is worth memorizing and reflecting on. Antaha shunyo bahi shunyaha shunyaha kumbha ivam bhare antaha purno bahi purnaha purnaha kumbha ivarnave. Inside empty, outside empty, like an empty bottle in midair. The emptiness inside the bottle and the emptiness outside the bottle are the same emptiness. Inside full, outside full, like a full bottle in the ocean. The water inside the bottle and the water outside the bottle are the same water. The word for empty is shunya, shunyaha, and the word for full is purnaha. This is some advanced philosophy, y'all, and I hope that you get a chance to experience it and appreciate it. Thank you for your time.